Hello, everybody, and welcome to the brand new episode of Legends of LOR. We are rejoined this week by Frenchie for the first time,
Yes, this is my first appearance. My name is Frenchie.
and actually for the first time, Spidz from Arcane.
It's me, Spidz from Arcane. I think I cut out at the start, but it's me, Spidz from Arcane.
You're all good. Yeah, so welcome, Spidz, to the show. You want to talk about yourself for a bit?
I'm able to talk about myself from a bit. So I began when Arcane started, because I'm obviously of Arcane. But before Arcane happened, which sounds like a paradox, but whatever. Before Arcane happened, I played the video game Legends of Runeterra. I started playing technically in the second beta, but more realistically between Rising Tides and Call of the Mountain when the Gay Poro released. That's literally the only reason I'm playing is because the Gay Poro was free, and the person that would become my partner was like, "Hey, there's a free emote in the shop. You should get it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And that's what got me into the game, basically. But since then, I've been playing the video game. I made it to Masters at one point, then played in a tournament at one point. I think the most successful thing I've ever done is top 8 that one seasonal. And yeah, that's Spidz. That's it.
All right. That's a pretty cool backstory, I have to say.
Thanks.
And welcome to the show. So we had a few things to talk about today. Yeah, the second Runeterra Eternal Open, where Floppy Mudkip is showing the script writers are getting lazy because he won it once again in the finals. And congratulations to him. We have the brand new cards coming out soon. We got the Nidalee package officially revealed. And then we have Aegis coming back on July 7th with a little over 20 teams have been revealed so far as of this recording, I believe.
I
24 or
believe
something, right?
24.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we can start with the Eternal Open. So I'll start with my run because I went 4-1. So I started my run at 9:30 p.m. when it ended at 11. So I just played 5 rounds and then it was like 10:50. I'm like, I'm not finishing, so I'm just gonna give up so I get the XP. I brought the triple black flame lineup as promised. I played Gwen Aurelia, I played Talia Ziggs, and I played Anivia. And by the way, Anivia was banned twice. I think people were just afraid of whatever the heck Anivia was. Because like, oh shoot, this guy brought it to an open, he must know what he's doing. I'm banning that. And yeah.
How would the decks do? Like, was there one deck that was clearly better than the other? I presume Talia Ziggs was the best one. That's my expectation. But
Believe it or not, I think Gwen was actually my best one. To be fair, I have like 300 games on Gwen Aurelia, so I have a lot of experience in that deck. So that was actually my best performing one. Talia Ziggs also did really well. I had a funny game where I got 3 Ziggs. I black flamed a Ziggs, and I copied it with Talia twice. So I just attacked with 3 Ziggs, which was really funny. And Anivia, believe it or not, was the worst of the 3 decks.
that doesn't sound like a single bit, actually. That's exactly what I expected.
You're telling me taking a 45% win rate champion and asking, how can we make this worse? Ended up being worse? Damn.
I mean, are there any other targets besides Anivia in that deck? Like Hunting Boar? What other targets
Yes,
do you have?
I actually did have Hunting Boar in that deck as well. So if I was smart, I would have played Revna, because that would have been really funny. But I wasn't, unfortunately.
Sorry, what you wanted to do was play a 6-mana 2/2 and then play a 3-mana non-tempo card, and that was going to be your way to win the video game?
Correct.
Okay.
You see, my opponent would be so confused they'd have no choice but to just hit pass and let me do my thing. That's the goal.
It'd be okay, you're scaling. You're going to beat the Aatrox deck by scaling, or whatever thing is popular, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to play a Shadow Assassin that's a 6/5. How can they beat that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I played it for fun and I had a blast. I was laughing really hard. People in the call I was in were like surprised I was winning any games, and it was really funny. I was just streaming it for them because I was not expecting it to get qualified to the next round, so I was just doing it for content. And 4-1, not as bad as I expected it to be. That's 4 more wins than I anticipated.
Does that include your Prime Glories? So was it actually 2-1? Was it
Yes, it
actually
does.
6?
It does include my Prime Glories.
Okay.
So with my Prime Glories, it went from 4-1 to 4-1 because I have 0.
Oh, all right, fair up. So you just haven't collected them, or you haven't been playing, or
I have not played Gauntlets. The only Gauntlet I played a lot of was free build, and I didn't get enough for the Prime Glory.
right? I think I got all my trophies from the opens. So like I just assumed everyone had at least one, but I don't know how the numbers work out. Like
I
that
think
sort of
I
stuff is
had
beyond me.
one. I just forgot to use it.
Right? Yeah. I saw that happen to Drizzle as well. He forgot to claim it, and so he just started with only one instead of 2.
Oof, hate to see it. Well, how did your opens go, Frenchie and Spidz? I guess we can start with Frenchie first.
My open, well, this one actually tilted me a lot, and
Oh,
I sort of
no.
purged the memory of this open from my mind. I went 4-3, and a lot of my losses this time around were because a lot of my opponents drew a lot of champions, and the only significant memory I remember from the open was the one that I got really tilted on, because it's the one that, like, I believe it's the one that got me caught out of the open. It knocked me out was because I was facing. I guess I should mention my lineup. My lineup was Samir Seraphine, Trundle Orn Timelines, and Tristana Si. And it was the second match of the 4th round. Well, I guess it was like technically 6th round because I had lost 2 before, and it was Tristana Si versus Draven Scion, and my opponent was gonna die because I swung with Tristana, and they blocked with Draven, and I was like, "This is fine." And then he put second Draven on stack as Whirling Death, and I'm like, "That's fine. I can." What's his name? I had a Hate Spike in hand, so I played a Hate Spike, and I was like, "This is fine." They played third Draven on stack as Whirling Death, and I was like, okay, this is still fine because I can use my second hate spike, and then they just hit my Tristana with the get excited, and I was like, that is my last Tristana. I cannot win from this position. And then they played Scion next turn and won.
Oh no, you hate to see it, man.
Yeah, it was just it tilted me a bit, but it was all in good fun. After I inted into my runs, I got to tune in and sit back and watch Dragon in his run, and I got every single time Dragon played Anivia Black Flame. I was able to say, I wonder if there was ever a better Anivia deck that could have played a spell here. Hint, hint, Wild Feast. That could have gotten us out of this situation. But
Hey,
Dragon
you
is
know
a good
what?
player, and he
Hey,
still managed to win.
Hey, you know what, dude? My Anivia deck won a non-zero amount of games, which is quite surprising.
That is true. It was quite surprising.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
Spence,
about
you want
you,
to talk
Spitz?
about yours? Yeah.
You guys are all like, I only got 2 wins and then I dropped out. I went 2-2, and my 2 wins were my Prime Glories. Like I went 0-2 drop. I decided to play for fun. This week I ran triple go hard, so I ran a Noxus go hard, a Targonian go hard, and a Ionian go hard. And I was trying to like hit Jax on vaguely if I was going to target anything. I ended up fighting aggro twice and just not finding like Vile Feast in some of those matchups, right? I went 9-2 the week prior, but didn't have tiebreakers. I was like 1 loss more than Margin Bay or something, or 1 lack of a win more than Margin Bay. Which, like, if I had both my Prime Glories, maybe I would have made it, but at that time I didn't. And so I was definitely, like, disincentivized from taking this one as seriously. I mean, like, I have no points. I can't really get into Worlds based on this season or anything, right? So, like, I mostly wanted to play for fun, and then I lost twice, and then it was, like, midnight at the time, because I have to start at 11, because it starts at 11 and ends at 11 or something like that for me. And so, like, my options are wake up at 6 or so I've got enough time, or just start at 11 and see how far it takes me. So being 0-2 at midnight or whatever, I didn't really want to continue anymore, and it didn't matter too much. But like, I didn't get any wins, so I don't know about you guys saying, "Oh, I only got 2 wins. It wasn't that good."
Oceania times are fucked up. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Also, I think me playing at the very end of the Open probably influenced the amount of wins I was able to get. Because I was
That's
playing
fair.
against other people that were at like 0 wins at the end of the Opens, so like these are people who are not trying as hard, I feel, to qualify.
Yeah, I ended up fighting like Arax and Nips, right? Who are like good players, and you know, Arax has won a few things and so forth. So like, you know, I was definitely not fighting random nonsense people.
Yep.
Speaking of the Open, when will Riot finally push the floppy nerf we all need? Come on, Rito, hop to it.
I mean, they
Maybe.
nerfed the Burbly. Like, what's his bucket? What's his name? Fluffy. Fluffy costs 2 more mana now, right? Like, it's impossible to discount. You want them to nerf Burblefish again? Make it like 10 mana, like all the other Burblefish cards? That'd be too much.
Wait, guys. We make it 10 mana, so then all of a sudden we can hit it off of timelines from our 10 cost cards. I have to say, I think it's really funny that you can hit Burble off of a ice pillar in timelines.
I mean,
And
you're
I'm
giving
s-
it +2 and elusive. It's better than what the
It's-
Ice Pillar does.
Listen, Dragon, like, think about it. What's better, right? A 10/10 Eldred with tough that gives you entire board and your Nexus tough, or a 4/3 elusive.
I mean, honestly, in some situations, the 4/3 elusive is actually better.
I know, and that's exactly my point. Just take the 4/3 elusive. It's good, Pog.
True, you got me there. Now, how we're buffing a card that's not in our deck with Revna for +2/+2, I don't know yet, but we'll figure that out later. But speaking
We
of
will
stuff
figure
that's
that out.
getting figured out, we're starting to figure out things for Aegis, as a lot of teams have been revealed this season. And spoiler, I am back this season with Targon's Valley, which would be me, Vengevine, Griff, and our special guest this week, Spidz.
They've poached me. I am no longer a pirate. I'm now a Valier. Is there a name for someone who lives in a valley? It has to be like Valleyite, right? Targonian. I'm a Targonian. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we have poached Spidz, and Frenchie has made not one but 2 teams to oppose us.
Yes.
You want to talk about your teams, Frenchie?
Sure. We are Shadow Isles Money Gang and Shadow Isles Money Mafia, based on the meme that has become infamous at this point. Apparently, the teams at Aegis kind of like the name as well. I mean, I also like the name. Our team A, so Shadow Isles Money Gang, is Dolmont, Hecate, me, and Andres, who Dragon wonderfully introduced us to.
Yep.
And Team B, Shadow Isles Money Mafia, is Seabass, Nos, AJ the Pro, and their captain is Poke King. And the captain for Team A is Dolmont. So, yeah, after I asked Dragon whether he had a spot open on his team or not, he said, "Hold up, we're gonna see what's happening." And then I was like, "No." So I made my own team, and we almost poached Conch too from Targon's Valley. Almost made the keyword.
Frenchie, sorry, what's the meme? You said it was based on a meme. I have no clue what you're talking about, and I've been like racking my brain trying to think about whatever this meme is. What's the meme?
The Shadow Wizard Money Gang.
What?
Are you telling me, have you not heard of Shadow Wizard Money Gang? We like casting spells. # legalize nuclear bombs.
You have just said a bunch of random words to me. What are you talking about?
Hold on. I'm pulling up the video. Everyone at home, this is important.
Look,
We need to
Frenchie, I hope you understand that I don't have the capabilities of making a visual guide for this. I would like to kindly ask that we show this later.
Alright, Smoj.
Well, I also have no clue what you're talking about, but that sounds funny, so I approve.
Hey. You don't get to pull that one on me. You know what the meme is because you laughed when I showed it to you.
Oh wait, that's what it was. Oh wait. All right, you got me there. But you know what else we can do? We can. I don't know. There's not much else to talk about for Aegis because it's not starting up until July 7th, and so we're gonna have some time for standard before that happens because new expansion is coming out in a week on the 28th, and we just got our first 2 batches of new cards, which is on Nidalee and her followers. Have been revealed, and we have a brand new mechanic in Ambush coming in. So I guess we can talk about the Ambush cards and what we think of them. Sound good to you folks?
Sure, I'm
To you,
down.
Dragon. I'll try
Yeah.
my best to talk about the new ambush cards with you.
Yeah. Yeah. See, guys, we're at 15 minutes now, and now we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about like 20 cards.
2 minutes per card. All right.
Yeah.
Do we
Uh,
want to start with the champion, or do we want to start with
I think we should
everything
probably
else?
start with the mechanic first, which is Ambush.
All right.
I think
That
it's
is
important to know about how Ambush works before talking about all the cards. So the way Ambush works is that it's on quite a few different units that are going to be showing up. So you can play them for their front half, which is like for example, I'll just use all terrain trooper as an example. So you can play it for 2 mana as a 3/1, or you can play it for its ambush cost, which would summon a Shadow in the Brush, which is a 2 mana 2/2. Then instead of summoning the all terrain trooper, you get the Shadow in the Brush, the 2/2. And then All Terrain Trooper creates a card in your hand that costs 0 mana because it's ambush 0. That will let you transform that Shadow in the Brush into it. So if anyone has ever played Magic the Gathering, this is Morph, essentially.
indeed.
Yeah, so it's basically Morph from MTG, but yeah. So you can either play as its front half, or you can play it face down, and you get a spell in your hand that you can pay mana equal to the cost for it to transform it. Very importantly, the ambush cost can be paid with spell mana. So it can let you cheat on mana a little bit for certain cards, which can be quite relevant. Also, it means that you don't have to have the unit mana for it. So you can like play the 2/2 for 2, and then you can like play a 3-drop, and then your thing's ambush cost is 1, you can still get that to transform. So I guess we should probably talk about some of the cards now. So I guess we can start with the champion, Nidalee. So Nidalee is a 4 mana 5/3 quick attack with ambush 2. She levels up when she's seen you summon or transform 4 other allies. And when she levels up, she becomes a 4 mana 6/4 with quick attack and overwhelm. Still ambush 2, and Nexus Strike, transforming back into Nidalee and create a javelin toss in hand. So she is a champion that has the ability to level down, like Evelyn and Nar. So I think that's pretty interesting for that. And importantly, Javelin Toss is deal 4 damage to an enemy. If there are no enemies when unplayed, target the enemy Nexus instead. So it's kind of like a Lux Laser, but you don't have Overwhelm. And I'm out of breath. All right. What do you guys think? I'll start with whoever.
Whoever in this call.
I guess I am whoever. I have decided to become whoever. I think Nidalee is pretty decent. I think mostly because, well, first of all, she has decent stats for her cost, which is always a good thing. 5/3 on a 4 is pretty good. We do, but like generally having to talk about like 4 mana champions. It's been a while since I actually it's been a week since I played lore, and it's been a while since I played this champion in specific, but thankfully Spidz is in the call. I do believe Sivir is 4 mana 5/3 as well, right?
Correct.
She indeed is somehow a 4 mana 5/3 quick attack. Spell shield.
Yes. So we have a Sivir without spell shield. That is a very important point because technically, at a fundamental level, like we could argue that like spell shield technically costs around 1 mana if it was like given a core cost itself as a keyword to like put on something. So like you get slightly understand it because it's like technically 1 mana. Nidalee doesn't have that, but instead she has ambush, which is kind of like pushed up by her Champion Spell, which is by itself a very strong card, which sort of like, I believe, makes the archetype very playable, which is Prowl, which is gives an ally +2 this round, or if it's a Shadow in the Brush, it gives it a +2/+2. So the ability to be able to cheat out Nidalee and keep her alive because of Prowl, as if you play her as a Shadow in the Brush, is pretty cool. I think that she's probably going to find a home in like something maybe in Freljord with the Warden archetype, or maybe just a Transform archetype. But she seems like a good aggro to mid-range card. That is
Alright.
my basic rambling of first sight of the card.
All right, Spidz, what are your thoughts on it?
I actually didn't realize that she can level up of summoning units, which makes her a lot better. I thought it was transform 4 units and then she downgraded, and I thought this was very weird. But since she levels up from summoning, which obviously includes the bush, right? So the bush and then a transform is 2 basically for her. She doesn't seem as bad within standard. Like, she's filling a very similar role in as much as she wants to play for like a fairer mid-range Shurima as opposed to what we currently have, which is Kaisar, which is more of a combo Shurima, right? So like she's trying to play for this general mid-range game plan, just with a little bit of a Nidalee twist, what have you, right? And you can compare it to stuff we've had before, right? So Towering Hierophant is similar to like your Ruin Runners. You've got this like Rockhopper card that's sort of similar to Merciless Hunter, although you'd probably still be running Merciless Hunter as well. And you're trying to do like this general mid-range game plan, right? You're combining Vulnerable and Quick Attack to do the thing that like Shurima's always wanted to do and only been able to do successfully with like Sivir Akshan. And so I think Nidalee has a niche that she can fit in, and it's pretty clear to me what that niche is intending to do. Even with like the Lux Laser, like that's pretty similar to what Sivir Akshan wanted to do, albeit no Absolver is a little bit disappointing for her in standard. But she seems okay. I think the lack of Spell Shield is quite large. I personally wouldn't say Spell Shield's worth 1 mana. I'd say it's actually more worth 2. Maybe in the world of Pytos, this is like an archaic belief, but the only real Spell Shield popper was like Blade's Edge and Ravenbloom decks, right? Every other Spell Shield popper has been like Mystic or Vile Feast or Pokey Stick. And so when Sivir Akshan was in standard, right, like Spell Shield was definitely worth at least 2 mana, because the only way you can kill Sivir is Challenger or like popping Spell Shield, right? There aren't any other ways to kill units. You can use like Blighted Ravine. That's like the last option, right? And so to that end, like Nidalee being able to be Buster Shot much more easily or that sort of stuff is a little bit concerning. Sheepstone was also rotated, right? So it's harder to protect it.
Yep.
So like Nidalee is, I think, much weaker than Sivir in like a lot of ways, and her change in upside is that, you know, she doesn't have to be played with Absolver. She creates the Lux Laser, and like she's like a side grade in terms of easiness to level up. It's a bit either way. I think there's interesting stuff she's attempting to do, wherein a lot of her support cards have like slightly larger number than the Sivir Akshan cards, and like Aurora Hallunatus is like interesting in that capacity. And there's things you can do where you reveal stuff, and it's like, oh my god, I thought you were playing Merciless Hunter, but it turns out you're playing Ruin Runner or whatever. But I'm not sold by her in a strength sense, because I don't think it'll have the same sort of board maintaining or presence, or fundamentally just like the same way it pressures the enemy's hand as much as Sivir did. And so I've got a little bit of trepidation regarding like her power from that sense. Ignoring the competitive stuff, she looks cool. She looks pretty fun. You know, +1/+1 and transform stuff is cool. Narcotic is a fun card. Like, I'm going to enjoy playing with her just because she looks fun. But like from a competitive standpoint, and someone that like played a little bit of Sivir Akshan, she doesn't. The comparisons to Sivir make her feel and look like a lot worse to me.
I can see that.
I do have just like one point to bring up as well, just in addition to that though, is the fact that I'm not as much of a Shurima gamer as an SI gamer, but I will say, like outside of Nasus in Standard, there hasn't been much of a playable. Well, okay, they have been playable, but not great win rate Shurima decks since rotation. Since a lot of their important tools did get rotated, like you mentioned, Absolver is now gone into Eternal. But having a unit like Nidalee, who naturally has Overwhelm, right? As opposed to like Sivir, which you have to use Absolver on. I agree she might be weaker, but I guess in a way like this more direct mid-range might enable Shrema to at least have a mid-range archetype, whereas as of right now it has like Nasus and a pretty bad Sundisk deck. So I think even though
Yeah.
she might not be as like not as good as Sivir, maybe overall she's slightly weaker. Maybe I think she will provide something that Shrema really needs right now, which is a playable archetype. So I think people will just play with her, and there might be a chance that just like the meta forms around what people believe is playable, and they're just like, oh look, Nidalee has a playable deck that has like maybe decent win rates. I think she's going to be around, maybe.
Yeah, I think there'll be
Yeah,
a player
absolutely.
experimentation for her. Also, speaking of Nasus, do not play Nidalee in your Nasus decks, folks. This is your PSA. Nidalee has 5 power. Nasus has 3 base power. Rekindler will revive Nidalee instead. It will not. It's not good. Don't do it. But one thing we haven't talked about for Nidalee is the fact that because of how the ambush mechanic works, is that you can play her as the brush on like turn 2 or 3, and you could play her ambush cost of 2, and you could have Nidalee on turn 3 instead of playing her on turn 4 as a 5/3. You can play her with the ambush cards, which I think is kind of relevant because getting a turn 3 5/3 quick attack is pretty solid. Her champion spell is also really, really good, I think, especially for her archetype. It's like 1 mana +2 power is not that good as a champion spell, but 1 mana for +2/+2 is insane. Because you can use that if your opponent goes to remove your bush. And then if the unit transforms, you will still keep the buff effect until the end of the turn. So like opponent goes to Mystic Shot the bush, and you play Prowl on it, so it becomes a 4/4, and then they go for another removal spell, and another Mystic Shot, and then you just transform her. She'll keep the +2/+2 still, even after she's transformed, which I think will be very good. I expect Prowl to be the best card in this archetype for the transform cards because 1 mana +2/+2 in the past has shown to be quite good. And even if it's very limited on just being able to use on brush, I think that's definitely something to keep out in mind. Nidalee transforming back, I think, is interesting. I think it's interesting that she'll transform back after just striking the Nexus once. And Javelin Toss is quite a strong removal option, but I think it also like kind of hurts your ability to close out games a little bit because you only get 1 Overwhelm Strike with her. So I think that will probably impact how good she's going to end up being. But I think Nidalee's a pretty cool card. I love the new design she has in this game compared to what she has in League of Legends. She looks so much better in this game. 100%.
Yes. A continuation of the LOR devs saving League champions, in my opinion.
In your fact, because that's definitely true. I think that's about all I have to say about Nidalee. I think she's going to be a solid card. I think she'll see plenty of experimentation, but I guess we'll have to see how good she ends up being. Because one big thing for how good Nidalee is going to end up being is how good the ambush mechanic ends up being as well. If ambush isn't good, then you always know, and like there's only like 1 or 2 playable ambush cards, and your opponent kind of knows what's in the brush. So it's a lot easier to play around. So you kind of need to be able to play more of them if you want to actually use the mechanic to like disguise what's in there, you know?
So I will say this because this is a new patch, and I don't believe like there's going to be an egregious number of balance changes for the patch. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it will come down to how like this archetype may come down to how strong just PNZ is. Like their control tools like High Note, Mystic Shot, Aftershock, because a lot of the new cards are in that removal range. Prowl is a very good card, as we mentioned, but like a lot of their tools are 1 health, 2 health, or 3 health. So I wonder, like, of the strength of the archetype if PNZ remains as dominant as it has in Standard.
Yeah, that's definitely a bit of a concern. But I think we can start moving on and talk about some of the other cards. Yeah, so we can talk about the new landmark, Bushwhack Trap, which is when I'm summoned the first time an ally transforms each round, give the weakest enemy vulnerable this round. I think this card is pretty garbage.
It is trash. Spidz, do you disagree? Are
Sorry,
you a
when I was watching
contrarian?
the trailer at like 1 a.m. last night, I thought it said Grant. I have now read the card. I now agree. I was like, oh, hold on, isn't this better Grand Plaza? I have now learnt it is not better than Grand Plaza.
No. I do not understand the purpose of this card because one, as you mentioned before, Dragon, in like your description of Ambush, there is the all-terrain trooper, which when they are summoned or transformed, they grant the weakest enemy vulnerable, or you could just play Rockhopper on 2. Well, I don't understand the archetype Bushwhack Trap is supposed to go into.
It's just doing the same stuff like Exhaust and like the Renekton, like he puts his weapon in the ground and the guy gets +2. It's got a 2-mana spell.
Weakest predator.
Yeah, that's what it is. I was gonna call it Relentless Pursuit, which is not correct. I think it makes sense what this card's trying to do, right? Like it's letting you spend mana in an earlier turn so that you can set up like a big overwhelm attack, right? That's like the point of this card. And like clearly one sub way of playing this archetype is running your like 2 overwhelm cards, maybe a third with Ruin Runner, maybe a fourth with XYZ or whatever, and trying to set up like these massive like pull their small unit open attacks. This isn't a consistent strategy and it's not worth the deck building space, but the card definitely has like ideological merit that they're trying to like push towards. I don't think it's inherently wrong. Now I know there's the other card that gives it Grant, but like the whole point is, having 6 copies or 9 copies because you'll be running Merciless Hunter in this deck to allow this idea to occur more and more. I think like this card isn't inherently flawed from a design standpoint at the very least. I think there's definitely like an intended idea that they're trying to go for here with that card.
That's fair. I will say, like for the overall archetype, it essentially requires you to have transform units if you want to trigger this again in the later turns. So you're kind of forced to play the ambush mechanic as well for that. So that once again depends on how good the ambush mechanic ends up being. So it depends if you want to pair it with the Renekton archetype. If you want to include this card as well, because once you summon it, you have to transform an ally to get it. Although I believe a champion leveling up counts as a transform, so you have a way to like level up a 0 on the bench, for example. That would trigger Bushwhack Trap.
And you could also level up Nidalee. She levels herself up when another thing gets transformed. So like if Nidalee's at 2 or 4, or 3 or 4, or 2 or 4 because you play your bush, and then 3 or 4 when you do Towering Pyrophant, you've given 2 things vulnerable and you've got 11 overwhelm attacking you, or 12 overwhelm attacking you. Like that's not awful.
Yeah, that does seem pretty decent.
I just had a terrible idea.
Oh no, how bad is it, Frenchie?
What if we run Bushwhack Trap in Kaisa Evelyn?
All right, moving on to the next one. Yeah, you know what, Frenchie? My deck that struggles with board space needs more things that take up board space. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? We've talked about the all-terrain trooper a lot, so we should probably just like finish talking about him here, which is he's just a 2-mana 3/1 with ambush 0. So you can play him as the Shadow in the Brush, and then you can transform him for 0 mana, and it'll just grant the weakest enemy vulnerable. So unlike so he's kind of a side-graded Rockhopper in my opinion, in that you don't. It's like a Rockhopper gives it the next unit your opponent summons, where this gives it to the weakest one. So you can have a bit more nuance for what you choose. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, and then he can go after it as well. And I think he benefits quite a bit from the ambush mechanic, because your opponent doesn't know if it's all-terrain troopers that's going to be going as the Shadow in the Brush. And since he is free to flip, you can always flip him whenever your opponent does something you want to respond to. So I think I actually think he's pretty solid, all things considered, and I think he's a pretty good option for the archetypes early game.
Be a stupid question. Can you have multiple bushes?
No, you can.
No.
There is a limit of 1 bush that you can have in play at a time.
Is that written in the ambush like keyword tags?
It was written on Twitter by the devs. It is not written in the ambush text.
Oh, how am I going to know about this then? All right, then fine.
Actually, I believe it was written on the vocab that was printed on Twitter, where it says, and so like on Twitter, there's like an informational for ambush, which says, can be played hidden if you have no other hidden ambush allies. So
Yeah.
specifically, like you need to have one hidden ambush,
Oh.
and nothing else. Yeah.
So if this guy is a spell, you can't make Nidalee a spell until this guy stops being a spell.
Yes.
Or until the bush is gone, or something along those lines.
Yes.
Weird.
Also,
Okay.
yeah. Also, important thing to note: if the bush dies, the spell associated with that bush also gets obliterated from your hand. So if you like play Nidalee on turn 2 and they mystic shot kill her, then your Nidalee in hand gets obliterated.
All right, but I mean, like the whole point of the Prowl card is to just like disincentivize enemy gamers from doing that, right? Like the Prowler card is sort of just like okay, it can protect the bush, but like we'll get to a point where people aren't attacking the bush because they know you got the Prowl card in hand. So like the whole point of the Prowl card is just to like prevent people attacking the bush easily. So that won't happen too often unless you're at 0 mana, right? That's the only time people will attack the bush, I think.
Something like that. I agree.
But yeah, I like All Train Trooper. I think he's likely better than a side grade. But I think your comparison to Rockhopper is apt.
Yeah, I
Good
think
card.
like sometimes it's better than Rockhopper because like you want to snipe the lowest power, their weakest unit that's already been played. Like if your opponent plays like a 2-drop that you want to kill, but you can't kill it because, like for example, your opponent your opponent has priority on 2 and they play like a Nora before your Rockhopper could come down. You'd want to get that vulnerable, but with this thing you can do that. And also, he's probably one of the better cards to just summon straight up because he just does it on summon or transform. So either or will trigger his effect. I think he's good all around.
I mean, he's also a great way to level up Nidalee, right? Like he's a 2-mana level up Nidalee twofold, right?
Yeah,
like that's pretty good. I think like every expansion or every set of cards for these sorts of things often have like one card that's generally good, like Belvethi Elder, Hired Gun, Merciless Hunter, these sorts of things. And like this is very clearly just that card, and it makes sense. And he's a cool dude, a bit of a side grade, but like he's a side grade in as much as he's helping out her man Nidalee, but also like can go into other things as a side grade instead of Rockhopper. But Rockhopper is going to be better until he has Eggs and so forth, right? It's a fine and interesting card, and I think it doubling up on the Nidalee level up is pretty good because of how cheap he is, right?
Yeah. So I guess the next card we can talk about is one that Spidz talked about earlier, which is the Aurora Halunitis, which is an ambush 4 follower that says when I transform, summon another copy of me, which is another Aurora Halunitis. It's a 3-mana 4/2. So all you can do here is you can either pay 3 mana for a 4/2, or you can ambush it as the bush, and then you can pay 4 mana as a spell to flip it over, and then you get 2 of them. And I think this is a pretty cool trick because you can like at burst speed essentially summon an extra unit because you summon the other 4/2. This is a very expensive effect for ambush. It is 6 mana to get both of them out, so you're kind of just paying the full cost for 2 of them. But with it being spell mana makes it a lot more affordable, and because the burst speed summon, I think that makes it a little bit better. So I guess the question is, do you think you'd want to be able to summon 2 of these at burst speed?
Like, I think the intended design here is to work with Bushwhack Trap. Like, this is the 3rd time that this archetype has said, please open attack. I really want you to open attack quite badly. And that's what this card says, right? Like, this card can be used offensively to block 2 things. And that also seems fine. Like, it's very clear that this archetype, to me at least, wants you to open attack and then defend in cute ways. And so, like, I can see the point of this card. If I was to build this deck, I think this would be one of the first things I consider cutting if I need space for Merciless Hunter or Rite of Negation or, whatever, like Forsaken Bakai or all this sort of nonsense, right? So, like, I think there's a bit of issues. Like, this card does a similar thing to Towering Pyrophant in that, like, it's trying to be an open attack fun thing. It's cool that it's a triple level for Nidalee. Do we know if Nidalee counts herself?
Nidalee does not count herself. She just specifies other.
Okay, so like you would need this plus 1 thing, and then that flips Nidalee for the turn, gives her the overwhelm, lets you push for what's this? Like 12 damage just with those 2 cards if you have like 1 more thing summoned. It's not awful, but it's probably one of the first things you cull, right? For space for other things.
Yeah, I will say like while the transform for the ambush part is pretty decent, just playing it as a 3-mana 4/2 is pretty suboptimal, I would say.
I mean, yeah, it's that all Merciless Hunter. Like, I know I'm harping on Merciless Hunter, but that's like the best card Shurima has.
Yeah, but Merciless Hunter also has Fearsome. This card does not have any keywords at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is a bird, which might be relevant.
Oh, with like the Ionia card.
Yeah, just probably not in this archetype. Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's pretty all things considered.
Doesn't Aurora Holonatus, or however it's pronounced, also technically like make your curve worse compared to Towering Pyrophant?
I mean, we should probably talk about Towering Pyrophant first before we do that, which is the Towering Pyrophant is the 6-mana 6/5 Overwhelm, but has Ambush 5, so you can play it as a 2-drop 2/2, and then you can pay 5 spell mana to transform it into the 6/5. And yeah, I think this card is probably better than Holiday is because Overwhelm 6/5 Overwhelm is bigger, and you can cheat it out on turn as early as turn 4 if you really try for it. I don't think you should, but you definitely can.
My thinking was that against aggro, right? You would rather have 2 4/2s. But like this archetype seems pretty decent against aggro anyway. You've already got a 1-mana 2/3, and you've got like All-Terrain Trooper, which blocks aggro and then gives vulnerable to something, right? So like I guess you don't really need Aurora Holonatus against aggro. Like, even if you've got turn 3 attack token and then turn 4 you're blocking like 2 rear guards or something. Like, it's fine, but I'm sure you've got other options against aggro. So sure, I think like Pyrophant will inherently be better than Holonatus. You could say something like Holonatus is 4th Hierophant or something, but that's not going to be entirely true.
Yeah. Pyrophant seems like an okay finisher. It's smaller. It's a bit smaller than other Overwhelm cards we've had in the past, like Alpha Wildclaw. But the fact that you can ambush it makes it a little bit better, in my opinion, because you can just you can like have a 2/2 bush, and all of a sudden it's just a 6/5 Overwhelm body out of nowhere, which can catch people off guard.
I mean, you say out of nowhere, it costs 5 mana, right? Like, so you have to prepare for this, and it's costing more than Vengeance, and it's costing way more than Quicksand and stuff. Like, pairing Pyrophant is okay. It's probably still worse than Ruin Runner, but it's okay.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
I think it is okay for the archetype. I don't know if it's gonna end up making the cut though. It is quite expensive. 5 mana transform effect is quite expensive still. It is the most expensive actually. So I think that'll put a little bit of a damper on it.
I mean, is it the most expensive transform effect Aurelian Soul? Man is 10 mana. I'm being like really nitpicky here.
All right, you know what? You got me there. All right. So I guess there's 3 more transform cards to talk about. I'm going to talk about my favorite one, which is Blimp Pack Poacher. So Blimp Pack Poacher is a 2-mana 2/2, but it has Ambush 3, so you can play it face down. And when I transform from Blimp Pack Poacher's Ambush, the next time I block or unblock this round, capture my enemy if its power is 6 or less. So essentially, this guy wants to be used as a combat trick. So like your opponent goes to block your bush, and all of a sudden you just flip your Blimp Pack Poacher, and then you just capture their unit they're blocking with, which I think is pretty funny.
Right, but you can only have one bush at a time, right? So like,
Correct.
If they just don't ever block your bush, you've got a brick in hand.
Although it's also when it blocks as well. So if your opponent attacks you, you can just like put this in front, and then you can transform it and say, "Haha, I'm taking your unit."
Right, and I guess against control, you're always playing it as a 2-mana 2/2, so that's also fine. I see.
Yeah, and I will say it is power 6 or less. So if your opponent like just plays a Battle Fury in response, you just die. But when that doesn't happen, it has some interesting tempo swings. It's like being able to capture a unit is pretty strong. But then they come to the downside, which is it's a 2/2, which is very vulnerable to just getting removed. If you want to actually do the capture thing, it's 5 mana, which is like if you play 2 mana for the bush, then 3 mana to flip it. That's pretty expensive. And yeah, even if you capture the unit, as soon as he dies, it comes back. And there's quite a few units that have pretty good summon effects. So sometimes you don't want to block them, even if you have to save HP. I think he's a really cool design, but I think he's probably not that strong.
I could see being cute as a one of. That way the enemy gamers always have to respect bushes. Like, they can't ever put their Renekton or Kaisar or whatever in front of a bush because it might get scrying sensed. Plus this guy, now they've lost their win con, right?
Yeah,
So,
oh
like,
my god. Using him to capture a Kai'Sa sounds so funny. Oh my.
I mean, you would need a strength reduction, but yeah.
No, you don't. It's power 6 or less.
Oh, 6 or less. Never mind. I just thought it was 5 or less because that's what it was in the video. I think they captured a 5 strength unit. Interesting. So you can capture Kaisar. That's pretty humorous. And that'll like fizzle the spell as well, right? Because like Kaisar needs to be on the field.
Fun fact: I believe his ability to while I'm watching the video, his ability does not go on the stack. However, I don't know if it goes off before or after skills would. So
I mean, it's a burst speed spell, so.
Yes, but like it's when he blocks. So I don't know if like skills would go on the stack first and then the block would occur. For example.
I guess so. I understand your concern. I think it should be instant, but that's just like vibes. I haven't mathed this out. But yeah, I mean, he counters Kaisar in that sense. He counters a few other things, or counters in as much as they need to play Void Seeker, which everyone runs in Kaisar to kill the guy.
Oh, obviously.
There's like, he's not invincible, right? He's just like a dude, but you know, before he becomes a dead dude, like he does some cool stuff. I don't know if you would run him 3 copies because he is expensive, and you know, like a 2-mana 2/2 as his alt form isn't great. It's just sort of okay. I mean, it's good enough against aggro, right? Because it blocks a rear guard and what have you, or blocks whatever fancy standard aggro cards exist, except Pigeon. But he. As a one of in like an open deck list format, you can see worlds where enemy gamers can't block bushes, so they don't block bushes, they block other units, then you play your overwhelm guy. They're like, oh my god, you played the overwhelm guy. I can't deal with this, and then they lose the video game, and that's always fun. So there's things that he does that I think is cool.
Yeah, I like him for mind game purposes, that like adding that in seems really cool. So we got 2 more ambush followers. So I guess next one we'll talk about is Bakak Hub, which is a 3-mana 2/2 fearsome. With Nexus Strike, summon a Paka Protector, and a Paka Protector is a 2-mana 3/1. But it has Ambush 1. So I think this card can be quite good, because you can play it as a 2-mana bush on turn 2, and then you can flip it for 1 mana, and then you can attack with it on turn 2, and if it hits their face, you get to summon a 3/1. So this is I'd say this is a bit variance of what it's good against. I think it's very good into aggressive mirrors. Or mid-range mirrors, kind of, because there aren't that many units with 3 power that you're going to be seeing on turn 2. So if you have like token on 2, you can play this, transform it, and then strike, and then you get a 2/2 and a 3/1, which is a very strong play for like, even if you're spending a spell mana for it. I'd be very happy to spend a spell mana to transform it and get a 3/1 for it. And if it hits again, you summon another one. So this card can snowball quite heavily from things like that, because with Fearsome it's hard to block. But against decks that have good removal, like Quietus or Mystic Shot or things like that, this card gets a lot worse.
Have really made me like this archetype. Like before this conversation, I was like, this archetype sort of blows. Like, give me my spell shield on my 4-mana unit. But like, this is really interesting because they won't want to block the bush if it's after like turn 3 or something, because they're fearful of Overwhelm Man, and they're also fearful of a few other things, right? Which means that you can get this and get this unit. They can't Mystic Shot the bush because they will lose to 1-mana Sharp Sight, right? So they're not permitted to do that, which means what you've got is a bush that will hit the Nexus, which means this procs. I haven't considered that really as a gameplay pattern, mostly because I don't think I knew Prowl existed before today. But
yeah,
this
like for
card...
example,
you go.
Yeah. Like for example, your opponent could be like, okay, I want to block this. I'll block this with my Mayor, and then there's like, okay, cool, Nidalee, and it just eats it for free.
Yeah. And Paka Club also progresses Nidalee by 1 because a unit gets summoned and then Nidalee levels up. And like, I think it'll be generally important to get Nidalee flipped every single time she attacks, right? And all you need for that is an ambush thing, and then either another ambush thing, or a regular summon plus this unit, or a regular summon plus like the 3-mana unit, right? So there's like interesting stuff with like constantly getting your Nidalee leveled, and like you only really want to attack 2 times with leveled Nidalee. In theory, that should win you the game. But like making sure that happens is like a thing you want to be trying to organize rather consistently. And this card being like a relatively good attacker that also summons a unit is pretty interesting. I hadn't really considered how this works with the mind games as much. I just saw it as like a cool dude that summons a thing. Like they Mirai Warden when they hit the Nexus, which is cool, but I didn't think too much of it. But I think Prowl is like why this card becomes good.
So I'm going to slightly disagree, though. So I like Pocket Club, but I don't think it's as good, though.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, I think it's good into like if you're against an aggressive deck, I think this card's very good. If you're not, it gets a lot worse.
I just think so even though the shadow and the brush mechanic is a bit proactive, I feel like one of the issues of Pocket Club coming down as a like onto as a 2/2 and then you can flip it them for 1 on ambush is just this like the Nexus Strike element of Pocket Club, right? Even though there is a mind game of like they played something on turn 2. Can I block the bush on turn 3? Like, does it flip into a Nidalee or one of the other like ambush 3 cards? The problem that I have with this is the fact that given the fact that the archetype leans towards open attacks, and if you're swinging with Pocket Club and like only as Shadow in the Brush, one of the issues I see is just, oh, you're attacking on turn 3 with a 2/2. Okay, they just press OK, they take the 2, and your Pocket Club never becomes a it doesn't become unhidden. It doesn't get the ambush proc, and you just hit them for 2. You didn't generate the 3/1. They didn't block. Nothing happened. You got your 2 damage hidden, but you were actually unable to progress your game plan. I think it is good against, like you said, aggressive decks, but into other archetypes, my fear is the fact that Pocket Club sort of it feels more proactive than the other cards that this archetype may want to run. And that might hinder it because it's like I want to attack and get the value of the Nexus Strike. But if I just open attack with the Shadow in the Brush and they press OK, it was a 2. It was on turn 3. I'm attacking for only 2. I don't know if that's a concern or not, but at least I think it is.
No, fair. I mean, is this good against aggressive decks? If you're playing this card and you don't pre-commit the spell, they will let it hit the Nexus, as you say.
Exactly.
If you pre-commit the spell, they're going to block with the guy that explodes himself and hits your Nexus for 1, or they're going to block with their 7/7 pigeon, or they're going to block with some other thing, right? This won't summon a unit. It won't Mirai Warden. I was imagining this more as a turn 5 or 6 play, as an easier way to flip Nidalee, but at that point, play Ruin Runner, right? Play a card that has Overwhelm and wins the game on their own. Right? You don't need this to make Nidalee Ruin Runner. Just play Ruin Runner, right? So I think I agree with you in that aspect. I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think I can see that, but I think I saved the best, or at least the most interesting one for last to talk about, which is Avenging Vastaya. So Avenging Vastaya is a 3-mana 3/3 with Spell Shield, but it also has Ambush 3. And when I transform from Avenging Vastaya's Ambush, stop all enemy fast spells, slow spells, and skills. So this could be essentially a 5-mana deny on a unit.
Pog.
This card are common, but the Overwhelm guy is an epic. What?
Balance as all things should be. So this is the card that makes all control players shudder when they try to play things while you have a brush in play.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, Frenchie, you were going to say something and I cut you off.
Oh, no worries. It was just a joke of Pog, spell morph.
Is that a Magic card? Is there a card that does this in Magic?
It's just one of the variations of morph.
Yeah.
So Spell Shield is cool. I think Spell Shield is good. 3-mana 3/3 Spell Shield is good. I'm very partial to Rite of Negation. I think Rite of Negation is really, really nice. And the fact that you can only have 1 bush makes me pretty averse to this card. Right? You can play this as the 3-mana 3/3 Spell Shield, but you're doing this in situations where you're expecting a spell, and like this can be great into like Senna Ruinations, or this can be great into like expectant vengeances. But so is just having like Rite of Negation in your hand. So like I'm not. Look, the card seems good. You're probably running it at like minimum a 2 of, but I'm just concerned that this card will end up just being okay, and like you'll end up playing it not as a bush relatively often, and you'll just be playing it as like worse Belvethi Elder, like relatively more than you expect. I think just because like I think Rite of Negation does what you want a little bit more, and it's not as good at open attacking. And I mean, it's like okay at open attacking, but so does Rite of Negation, right? They do the same thing. I'm just like a little bit. I'm not as sold on this card, but like I know I'm probably missing something about the gameplay patterns, right? Like there's going to be a gameplay pattern that like makes this card better than Rite of Negation in some capacity, and it's going to be some sort of like Ruination 1 turn, Ruination the 2nd turn, or something like that.
Yeah. So a few things about this card to consider is that first off, have it get summoned as a shadow in the brush, which means it is interactable by your opponent. So, for example, they have a challenger unit, they could challenge it, they could Mystic Shot it, they could Quietus it, etc. And if your opponent does that, this card is significantly worse than Rite of Negation, because then you either have to play the Avenging Vestaya to try, you have to play the ambush to flip it to keep it alive. You have to let it resolve, and this dies, and your mana investment's just wasted. Or you have to like buff it up somehow so it doesn't die. So it's a lot more vulnerable as a unit. However, the upside is that on like Rite of Negation, you also put after this is done doing its job, you have a 3/3 with Spell Shield in play. So you get to basically have the effect from Rite of Negation, but you also get a unit in play, which is pretty solid. It's like five mana, summon a 3/3 with Spell Shield, and do Rite of Negation, and you also don't have to kill an ally or destroy a mana gem. Is much better tempo wise. The issue, of course, is that it's much more disruptible because your opponent could try to force it out of you through combat.
This is interesting. I hadn't thought about Quietus at all. Quietus makes some interesting decisions in this.
Quietus is really annoying for this archetype, I think, because all your bushes are 2/2s.
Yeah, I mean, like it forces Prowl out at the very least, right? And it means that you can then put your Mystic Shot on a Prowl, right? Like Heimer Jace might have a very fun time dealing with this, absent of like Rite of Negation or what's this guy's name? Avenging Vestaya. Like, I think like just because Heimer Jace will have like 5 copies of Quietus and Soul Harvest, and then a few copies of other forms of interaction. Avenging Vestaya is definitely an interesting side grade. You've convinced me a little bit more than I was originally on it, because like the unit is fine, and there are things you can do with it. I'm so used to like Silver Akshan, right? And like the idea of just developing like Merciless Hunter is so much more attractive to me than developing this unit.
Yeah, also another thing to consider is that this card's mere existence makes Shadow in the Brush a lot more dangerous for your opponent. Because now if you play a Shadow in the Brush, if your opponent's playing like Set Karma, for example, or like say they're playing a Vengeance deck and they were going to Vengeance to your Nidalee, for example, now they're like, oh shoot, they could have Avenging Vestaya. Now I have to consider I want to go after the Brush first, or go after Nidalee and hope they don't have it, because sometimes you don't have the option that you can do both. You only get to do one or the other. So this also could lead to a lot of fork situations like that, where you play this and now your opponent's put in an awkward situation where they have to consider, is the Brush you just played in Avenging Vestaya, or is it something else?
I mean, yes, that's extremely cute, but you could also just like develop another unit or have Rite of Negation in hand. Like this gameplay pattern already exists. Right, like if Vengeance Man was already losing to Rite of Negation, Vengeance Man is just as losing to this. Like that doesn't actually change anything except like how it feels, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
like it's cool in the brain. It's like super cool. You've like mind gamed them, but in reality land, like this is the exact same win rate gameplay pattern.
But you can also spend it over two turns, so you can play this as a 2/2 in one turn. That's only 3 mana instead of 4, which could be relevant.
But also, you can't open attack as much because your bush is stuck with this. Like, you're not open attacking with your, Alpha Wildclaw anymore, right? Because it's this card instead of another card, right? So, like, sure, your attacks are different slightly, but it's still the same gameplay patterns to an extent. You were going to say something, Frenchie. I think I cut you off.
Yes. No, that's fine. That's fine. I was gonna mention the fact that like we're thinking of Rite of Negation, and we're thinking of as like there is one like case scenario where I can see Avenging Messiah being better, and I think it's a situational card that depends on the prevalence of Bandle in the meta, right? Because I think that depending on like SI Nora or like SI Trist and the popularity of those type of archetypes being in the meta is semi-relevant, because even though those archetypes can run like Pytos, the prevalence of pings of like deal 2 pings, I think is just, it might be a bit high, but it's just good enough where even though you're in SI, the ability to play around Bandle Deny is a bit relevant, I guess. But like that's maybe me just coping.
Right,
So
because this isn't considered a spell, so your opponent
It's a
can't
skill.
use Bandle Deny to
Yeah.
stop this.
right, I think that's interesting. I think similarly, meta-wise, in as much as you're fearful of Vandal stuff or even like Noxian stuff to an extent, I think what this card does allow is like less checkmatey deny positions, right? Like
Yeah.
previously, the two uses for like Rite of Negation or Deny is one to gain a bunch of tempo, right? Like you deny this thing that was going to lose you a bunch of tempo, you're using it to maintain tempo. The other reason is because you've set up like a lethal and this prevents their one way of entering your lethal, right? This was common in Lee Syndex. It's common with how I used to play Silver Action, where you set up your Absolver attack and then they play something and then you do this thing, right? I think what this card permits is for you to be a little bit more flexible with those positions because you get a tempo upside inherently with the creation of a 3/3 spell shield, right? So when you're fighting these Bandle decks and they play like, I don't know, 2 Pythoses on the stack, or they even just like 1 Pythos on the stack to pop something or other, right? Like you're able to play this as just like a casual positive tempo play without the feeling of I've lost my Rite of Negation and I'm getting nothing out of this, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think those positions where Bandle is good or Noxus is good, or even like weird versions of PNZ, this card has a lot of value in just being a much less committal deny because you're still getting something out of it, even if it just denies a single Pythos.
Oh yeah, if my opponent is like committing 2 Pytoses or like Pythos and a group shot, and I flip this card and I deny them the Pythos and the second half of Pythos, I think that would be good enough. If I can take
Yeah.
out like, technically 3 pings, I think that's fine.
Yeah,
And
the,
also,
the Bandle police are trying to get you. I hear it in your background.
Yeah,
they're coming
yeah.
to me. They're coming to the Nora police. They're angry. Yeah, they're coming
She's
to
summoning
arrest
cops
me.
from her bottles.
She's coming to us for her portals.
Caitlin's coming through.
Oh no. But yeah, so that's all of the ambush followers and the Nidalee package. There's a few other cards that are left. There's like Bristlehog, which is a 1/2 that gets +1/+1 when you transform. I think that card's not good.
Can I make a quick comment about Bristlehug?
Yes.
Something Donut said like a few months ago that's like stuck with me is that like every single new archetype has like a 1-mana card that levels up, right? There's Crimson Pigeon, there's the Aatrox Vein little dude, there's this guy, there's like so many of these little like 1-mana weird guys that just become massive units for some reason, and they're like their own mini win conditions, and I think that's really cute. That like
Yeah.
there's so many just weird 1-mana like 2/2s or 1/2s that just like do stuff now. Like it started with Bark Beast, but it's way more consistent nowadays.
Yeah, like chip, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's Bristlehog. Face check manifest a card with ambush. I think that card can be pretty solid. I don't know if you see his main deck play, but I think you're playing a deck with Conchologist. You should be happy to hit this card. Then your opponent's gonna cry when they have to. Also, importantly, this cannot hit Nidalee because cards that manifest cannot hit champions.
Very important
Yes.
point.
Until they release the 4-mana 4/4 that says manifest
also,
can now hit champions.
Also it's pretty consistent in what I can find, considering there's only 5 non-ambush followers. So you're getting either Avenging Vestaya, Aurora Hallunatus, Towering Pyrophant, All-Terrain Trooper. Oh no, there's 6. Blimpack Poacher or Pocket Club. So there's only 6. So you can quite consistently. You'll have pretty good odds to find what you're looking for. There's Big Game Tycoon, which is 7 mana, 5/6. Manifest a card with Ambush. When an allied transform, double its power and health. This does include champion level ups. That could be relevant. And like he manifests the card on play. And the transform clause is pretty strong.
Yeah, like
But
I think Big Game Tycoon just goes very well into overwhelm decks.
yeah. But at 7 mana, I think it's a little slow. I mean, he is very good with Towering Pyrophant because like each transform into Towering Pyrophant, you get like a 12/10 overwhelm, which is really good. Or like if you level Nidalee, all of a sudden she's now like 12/10 or 12/8 overwhelm. It's like stuff like that is quite good, but at 7 mana he's really slow, so I don't know if that's gonna let him see play. Any other quick thoughts I have about this card?
Not on this card, but
no,
I think
not on
face check is really cool for like open deck list, right? Because then there can be anything, and they're gonna be scared, right? I think that's just like a cool card. That does.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really like face check.
And then finally we have Anura and Froop, which is allies that have a different subtype than other allies in play cost 1 less. So so this card itself is a reptile, which means you will not discount reptiles, but she'll discount other things. So like for example, if you have a cat, she'll discount. If you do not have a cat in play, it'll discount it by 1. Or like a fae or a bird or other stuff. So this card could be pretty decent. Important to note, this card is in PNZ. It is not in Shurima. All the previous cards we've talked about have been in Shurima. Wait, actually, wow. This is the only non-Shuriman card that's been revealed so far. So
Yeah.
this is in PNZ, and I think that does have a bit of an impact on this. And also, I think there hasn't really been anything released that like cares about the multiple subtypes so far. So I'm gonna guess we're gonna get more support for this coming later on. So I think it's probably a bit too early to fully vote for this card.
My hope is that there's an Anura and Froop Path of Champions deck, and then when you're drafting, you can pick up Poros or Spiders and what have you, and have like a cool Anura and Froop Path of Champions thing. Like I don't know if that'll be part of what Nidalee does, or I presume Nico is transform stuff. I think that's what she does in the League of the Legends. So like I can imagine either of those involving Anura and Froop, and then you can have some interesting Path of Champions stuff. Because Path of Champions is an interesting stuff to transform in the part with like Nair and Evelyn. So like I hope there's something cool you can do with her there. I think in standard she's probably a little bit low power. Like she's not only understated, but also like a -1 cost reduction on units not on the turn that she's played in PNZ that doesn't really care about stats. Just like nothing's congruent about this card in my mind.
Yep.
But Path of Champions could definitely do something interesting with her.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see what we're gonna get coming down the road. But so guys, remember how I said it'd be 15 minutes and 45 minutes? I may or may not have been wrong. We'll have to see after the editing's done. But thank you, Spidz and Frenchie, for joining me. That was a fun conversation to have about these cards. And I think my thoughts have updated a little bit for how I think about some of these cards and how good they could be. And I'm pretty excited to see the patch next week. I will say this. Next week, I will not be going over every single card that's revealed. My plan is to go over the champions and then go over what we think are going to be like the 10 best cards that are going to be released and then talk about those. And if some don't get left out, oh well.
Thanks for having us. I really enjoyed being on the podcast and saying like Ruin Runner like 5 times and Merciless Hunter twice as much. Thanks.
No problem, Spidz. Thank you for coming along again. It was great to have you.
Again?
Yeah.
It was. I imagine it was a very new experience for you, Dragon having 2 new fellow like podcasters with you.
Yeah, it's having 2 people on for the first time
Exactly.
Must have been really stressful having to haggle us like, unherded cats.
Hey, that's why they released the cat subtype, so we can herd them.
Yeah, I can't wait for them to be a 2-mana 2/3 cat herder when I'm summoned if you behold a cat, draw a cat.
Exactly. But with that out of the way, thank you all for coming, and we will talk to you next week with the rest of the reveals and go from there. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.